Hi, David here from Guitaria Music Tuition. So today we're going to go over 9 basic chords for beginners. So these are known as open chords because they all contain at least one open string. So an open string is a string that you're not actually pressing on, you're not fretting. For example, this or this. There are other types of chords, bar chords and power chords, but for beginners, the most common ones that they learn are open chords. The first chord we're going to look at is called E minor. We're going to place our second finger on the second fret on the A string and your first finger on the second fret on the D string. And we are going to use our fingertips to press down on the notes, and you're going to strum all 6 strings. You can also pick the notes separately, so pick the strings one at a time. That way you'll hear if all the notes are ringing out or if you're leaning back and muting any strings. We don't want to mute any strings, so if you pick the strings and it sounds like this, then you need to check your technique. So there's 3 common reasons that the chords might not ring out and sound very good. Most common reason is people lean their fingers back and touch or mute the strings below their fingers, like this. So you want to make sure you arch your fingers. Short nails definitely helps as well when playing chords. And make sure you're clearing any strings below your fingers. The second most common reason is people don't press hard enough on the string itself. So make sure you've got enough pressure on the string you're pressing on. Then the third most common reason is people press on the metal fret. Their finger goes onto the fret and that will mute the string slightly as well. And there is another reason that the chord might not ring out too well, and that is if you have something called a high action. So that is if the string is quite far or high off the fretboard, off the wood itself. That will make it a lot more difficult to press down on the string, and you might get some fret buzz or some muted notes. But based on the fact that your guitar is set up well, then just check that you're not on the metal fret, make sure you're pressing hard enough, and make sure you're not leaning back with your fingers, and that you have short nails. So with the minor chord, some people do prefer to have their first finger on the A string and the second finger on the D string, like this. I personally prefer my second finger on the A string and my first finger on the D string. Some people use their second and third finger to play the E minor chord, so their second finger on the A string, their third finger on the D string. It all really depends on what chords you change between. So it might be that using the first and second finger is better to change between certain chords than others, or it might be that the second and third finger is the better finger choice for changing between certain chords. A lot of beginners tend to think that using the second and third finger might be the better choice, because when they go to the E chord, they feel that they've only got to put the one finger down, the first finger. But it's quite uncommon to change between an E minor and an E major chord. So just going back to the E minor chord, I would say use your second finger on the A string, your first finger on the D string, both in the second fret, and don't forget to play all 6 strings, like this. Okay, so the next chord we're going to look at is called E, or E major. So we're going to place the second finger on the second fret on the A string, third finger, second fret on the D string, and the first finger on the first fret on the G. And you play all 6 strings. Don't forget to pick each string separately. Okay, so the next chord is A, or A major. So to play this, we're going to put the first finger on the second fret on the D string, the second finger on the second fret on the G string, and the third finger on the second fret on the B string. For this chord, we're going to strum from the A string. That's the 5th string here. So don't play the thickest string, just go from the A string. Don't forget to pick the notes individually, just to check that you're not muting any strings. Now this one can be quite tricky if you've got quite big fingers to fit them all into the 2nd fret. So just persist, just try your best. With time it will become easier. Try and squeeze them together and make sure you don't lean back on the strings below. The next chord we're going to look at is A minor. So for this, you're going to put your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the D string, your 3rd finger on the 2nd fret on the G string, and your 1st finger on the 1st fret on the B string. Also, with this chord, we're going to strum from the A string. Like that. The next chord we're going to look at is C, or C major. So for this one, you're going to place your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the A string, your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the D string, and your 1st finger on the 1st fret on the B string. For the C chord, we're going to strum from the A string, the 5th string. And when playing these chords, you want your fingers to be as close to the metal fret as possible, because that's where it sounds the best. If you're too far from the fret, so let's say I'm on the 3rd fret here, this is the 3rd metal fret. If my finger's too close to the 2nd metal fret, then there's more chance that you're going to get fret buzz. So you want to be as close as you can to the fret you're on, but without being on it. You don't want to press on the metal fret, because you'll also get a dud note or a muted note. So, for example, in C, my 3rd finger is close to the 3rd fret, 2nd is close to the 2nd fret, my 1st finger is close to the 1st fret. It might look like I'm on the frets, but I'm just a few millimeters behind in the sweet spot. So the next chord we're going to look at is G. So to play this one, we're going to place our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the high E string. Your 1st finger will go on the 2nd fret on the A string, and your 2nd finger on the 3rd fret on the low E string, on the 6th string. For this chord, we're going to play all 6 strings. So the next chord we're going to look at is D, or D major. For this one, we're going to place your 1st finger on the 2nd fret on the G string, 3rd finger will go on the 3rd fret on the B string, and the 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the high E string. For this chord, we're going to strum from the D string. So our next chord is going to be D minor. For this one, you're going to place your 1st finger on the 1st fret on the high E string, your 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the B string, and your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the G string. So for this chord, we're going to strum from the D string. Don't forget to pick the notes individually, just to double check you're not muting or leaning back on any strings. Our 9th chord is the F chord. So this is probably the most tricky chord out of the 9 chords that we're learning here. A lot of people struggle with it to much frustration. Let's give it a go. We're going to place our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret on the D string. We're going to place your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the G, and your 1st finger is going to press on the B and the high E strings. So your 1st finger will press on 2 strings. With the 1st finger, you want to put it slightly on the side, so don't use your fingertip like you would with all of the other chords. just put your finger flat, tilt it slightly to the side so the nail points slightly towards the headstock. Then place down your second finger on the second fret on the G string, third finger, third fret on the D string. And for this chord, we're going to strum from the D string. As I say, this one is the most difficult to play because you're barring two strings. It's quite an awkward angle for beginners too. So my recommendation is to persist with it, but don't spend all of your energy focusing on this one chord. You've got another 8 to learn that are slightly easier than this one, so I'd recommend starting with those and then maybe tackling this chord last. So just a couple more tips then when playing chords. So you want to make sure your arm is close into your body for all of these chords. As far as the thumb position goes, it's okay to have your thumb kind of pointing up here. You don't want to be hooked over. You don't want your thumb to be pressing on any strings. For the F chord, this is probably one on its own. I wouldn't recommend your thumb to be so high as perhaps with the other chords. With the F chord, I'd recommend your thumb to be a bit lower down on the back of the neck of the guitar. That way it puts your fingers at a nice angle so you don't mute any strings below. If you have your thumb too high on the F chord, there is a good chance you're going to lean back and mute the strings under your fingers. So make sure your thumb is a little bit lower on the F chord. That twists your fingers nicely to clear any strings below the fingers. If you struggle on any of these chords, experiment with your arm and thumb position, because just the slightest of movements can have a big impact on playing the chord. It does take time, so just persist. Recommend being warmed up before you practice chords. So if you haven't done that already, check out my video on the warm-up exercise for beginners. I'd recommend learning 2 or 3 at a time. Don't try and tackle all 9 at once because you will have trouble remembering them more than likely. So just learn 1 or 2 over a couple of days. Then after that, learn 1 or 2 more, refresh on the old ones that you practiced, and keep adding on 1 or 2 chords every other day or so. That way you'll probably find they stick in your memory a lot easier than trying to go over them all at once. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know in the comments how you get on. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more guitar related tuition videos.